Hi there, and welcome to Gray Muzzle Geekery for the week of September 9th, 2019, episode 31. I'm Dusty Red, and with me as always,
I'm Dusty White.
And let's get into this week's news. Gears of War 5 takes a proud stance on inclusivity. With the release of Gears of War 5, players can now pick a variety of battle standards to personalize their multiplayer game. While rooted with the concept of hyper-masculine power fantasy, the Coalition has took steps to ensure that many people have been included in this game in terms of having flags for asexuality, bisexuality, transgender, and people even with disabilities in terms of autism spectrums and other such things. So congratulations on the Coalition and Gears of War 5 for pushing the games.
And speaking of testosterone, step aside, Hobbs and Shaw. The original bad boys are back in the game. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence gear up for Bad Boys for Life.
And in breaking news, Bang Brothers, that's right, the porno company Bang Brothers, has put in a $10 million bid for the naming rights for the Miami Heat Arena. They want to put and change the name to the BBC.
What?
Yep.
What? Okay. What? Alright. If you spend hours jamming your fists to the back of Yoshi's head like I did, you'll be excited to find out that September 5th, Nintendo Direct introduced SNES Library for Switch Online subscribers. Other titles released: Super Metroid, The Legend of Zelda, and the original Mario Kart.
So excited! And finally, do you want to see how they rise up? A cheery little bottom, or perhaps the indomitable carrot? Slated to release in 2020, The Watch, based on Ankh-Morpork's City Watch from Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, will star Richard Dormer from the Game of Thrones playing as the one, the only Samuel Vimes. So excited. They will begin.
You are so fangirling.
Oh, I am so fangirling. They are slated to begin shooting at the end of September, and by 2020, they will have, I believe it's a 6-part mini-series, hour-long episodes, that will leave room for being able to return to the series. So, I am stoked. So, yeah, obviously we're getting ready to head out to the Alliance South Michigan Dragonfall. And we have been, quite busy, wouldn't you say?
Our plates are fulleth over.
Our cuppeth ranneth fulleth, and I hateth groupeth projecteth. It's my twitching over here.
However, you are doing quite well from the sounds of it.
Things have been good, and they have been interesting. And at the end of the day, I am learning new tricks on how to do these kind of shows. So, yay for setting me up to do stuff and learn things. Yeah. So, anyway, we're going to kind of go with this week's special episode in terms of having it be a listener question episode. And then we will probably be recording on our trip up to Alliance, South Michigan for more listener questions. Obviously, as I said before, our schedule is going to be a little cattywampus at the moment because we are so focused on this America's Next Top Podcaster contest that we've not had the time to really sit down and do our show properly, so to speak. Now, obviously, we're still going to put episodes out. We're still going to make sure that we fulfill our duty to say thank you to our generous Patreon listeners and supporters, as well as everybody else who has also just give us encouragement and shown us that they like what we do. So, obviously, for now, we're going to kick off with some listener questions that we were asked a little while ago before the mental health episode, if I'm not mistaken.
Right before, yeah.
And we'll have more listener questions coming up in the near future, as well as some tales to tell of, I don't know, flaming fruit, garbage cans, and a plate of chips with buffalo sauce.
That was a good night.
It was a good night. So until then, enjoy this week's listener questions, and we will be talking to you soon. And we are once again on the road for another LARPing adventure because adventure awaits, dear Dusty White.
Yes, it does.
And we are semi-live on 94 going to Alliance, South Michigan in Chelsea, Michigan. Michigan. Indiana.
Doesn't work quite as well.
Yeah, I know.
Too many syllables.
Emphasis on the wrong syllable. So, as usual, I am Dusty Red.
I'm Dusty White.
And we are doing another Roadcast to talk about our adventures and what is going on. But more importantly, we're going to do a Roadcast, which means we're doing listener questions. Yay! And you just want to go right to it?
Sure.
Let's go right to it.
Clay asks in our Discord channel, do either of you have a favorite tabletop character that you have created in the past?
Ladies first.
I think I've talked about it a little bit before, but my favorite tabletop experience overall thus far was Spitfire from Deadlands. Savage Lands?
Depends. Was it the Weird West? Or was it the Weird West? Yeah, it's all Savage Lands, but there's the Weird West and then the Wild West, I think it was. Because there was like a very specific Deadlands campaign that had like Wild West style, where it's gunslingers and pew pew pew. But then there was one where there was a like post-nuclear type version of Deadlands, where everybody's in the east.
So it was the first one.
Okay, it's the Wild West.
I was one of the I was one of the pew pew pewers.
Okay, tell me about Spitfire here.
So Spitfire was a bounty hunter who really wanted to be a Texas Ranger, and she took her hindrance was, or her holdup was, she was too curious, and she stuck her nose in some things that she probably shouldn't have done. She accidentally made an orphan because she went looking in a barn door that had glowy lights coming from underneath it and shot a kid's parents.
Accidentally make orphans, nope. I guess.
I definitely shot the kid's parents, and I had a real bad habit of calling my shots and then critically attacking. And let's just say I made some brain matter go smush a couple of times.
So you just like kicked the door down and just like, congratulations, you're an orphan.
Yeah, kind of. And there was at one point that even with a long-barreled rifle, I got to the point where I could... the DM could not move out of range far enough for me not to get... to not be able to hit him.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was great. She was fantastic. She ended up surviving the campaign, and she ended up having a magical weapon that she got stamped it was one of her 6-shooters, and it was called Stairs. And there's just a really bad inside joke about that, but we won't go into that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Red?
Well, I want to focus on Spitfire here a little bit. Did you have any particular character traits or anything? Because you described a lot of combat stuff. But what about and the fact that she just shot people at willy-nilly? Did you find that particular Deadlands campaign had character growth or anything to it, or is it primarily just survive?
I did eventually get rid of the hindrance of too curious, because it ended up we just got to the point where we knew too much, and if we kept poking it was very almost Cthulhian, that if we just kept asking too many questions, it was going to end up with bad results.
Dire consequences?
Yes. She lost, at one point she was in negative charisma points because she had just gotten a little crazy, had gotten like a gray streak in her hair, I think. So yeah, she was fun to play because she was just a brawler, and it was the only way out is through, basically.
Fitting. Let's see. So for me, I mean, I obviously have various iterations of Twitch Tinkerfoot, and I have a tendency of making characters that are going to have some sort of my own personality, tweaked in some way, or focused in just taking a trait and exacerbated to almost ridiculous heights. One of my favorite iterations of Twitch Tinkerfoot was for a Pathfinder campaign.
Okay.
That was actually ran by one of the friends of the podcast, by Pat Rickert,
Okay.
who now runs stuff at Loaded Dice Adventures. Go check him out. And he was running a Pathfinder campaign where I was playing a halfling inquisitor who, I can't remember the god he followed, but ultimately his thing was fair and open trade.
Okay.
Like, so highwaymen, bandits, pirates, all of those people who would interfere with fair trade were abhorrent to his religion. And it got to the point where, like, you'd even, to gain Inquisitor points back and such, you would do, like, rituals to get your points back. And one of his rituals was, after he defeated or killed one of these highwaymen or bandits, that he would fill their coin purse with wine and then drink from the coin purse to absolve them of their sins.
Gross.
Like, it's alcohol.
Don't you know where money goes nowadays?
Yeah, but it's a lot harder to slip gold coins in a bikini than a dollar bill. But clang, clang, clang.
I just had the visual of a very prolific stripper being encumbered.
Just shuffling out. We call her Jingles. So that version of Twitch, though, was much more pious in that regard. He was just very anti-thief, anti-rogue, very straight on the narrow. Not lawful good in a sense, though. Still chaotic good, would still do things, but definitely was pretty much like, hey, don't mess with fair trades. And so that was his big thing. And obviously he became a little bit broken because he was archer focused and he was an inquisitor, and inquisitors can be pretty beefy for that.
Okay.
But yeah, he was a halfling rogue or a halfling inquisitor, and just a lot of fun to play in that, especially in the world that we set up where we were lower level. We were dealing with, a variety of rogues and highwaymen and bandits that kind of opened up to the greater story. And yeah, it was just, and obviously Pat is just a very good DM, so he ran with a lot of that and ended up making my character, who came into the campaign a little bit later, I filled in for somebody that left, turned out to be a character that fit in because they were working with privateers and other such things that were like, hey, we have a guy that's going to lead you, and they ended up having me come in. And for whatever reason, I have a tendency of taking over parties and just becoming kind of the spokesman or a figurehead or something. They become the face. So they threw me right into the face role and was able to face roll. So it worked out really well. It was one of my favorite iterations for at least a tabletop character of Twitch Tinkerfoot in Pathfinder.
Okay. So we also have a question from TC. What's your favorite retro video game and why? And do you still play it?
Me first this time, I guess. Yeah, I obviously have a big swarm of retro video games I like to play. One of my favorites is still Chrono Trigger's good. I would say Secret of Evermore. Yes, Secret of Mana is very, very good. And Secret of Evermore still tugs at my heartstrings. I still enjoy Earthbound or Mother 2 if you really want to go old school.
Okay.
Just a lot of SNES games, I guess, is my retro. Obviously I played ColecoVision, and I do date back to older games, but I will still stand on this hill of the SNES was like one of the pinnacle and changing points in video games that just made role-playing what it is nowadays. Seventh Saga is still a game that's out there that I love to play every now and then. It changes. It's one of those it was one of those conceptual games that wasn't big for Square Enix.
Okay.
But when you played it, depending on one of the 7 heroes you played, and the concept is you had to basically accrue these 7 gems of power. And the gems were more or less fixed, but they would kind of vary every now and then. And you would pick one of these 7 heroes to collect all 7 gems. However, if you teamed up with somebody, it'd be like the most your party would have would be 2 people. But maybe every now and then, depending where you were, your teammate would betray you and try to steal your gems halfway through a dungeon or something.
Rude.
You would have situations where you would go to an area and one of those other 7 heroes already has one of the gems and you have to fight him for it. So it was a neat concept of a slightly changing game, but it wasn't. Just the only thing that changed was like who you fought at certain times. But it was one of my favorite games in that regard, and it was hard. It was a hard game. So it didn't fly in the Square Enix scene of like one of the best ones that ever existed, like the Final Fantasies and the Chrono Trigger, Chrono Crosses, and Secret of Mana and Evermore and such. But Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past and Super Metroid, and especially on an emulator, you'll see a item randomizer that takes Secret of Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past and Super Metroid, mashes it together as one giant game with all the items located randomly in both maps.
I think you had talked about this one, yeah.
And yeah, that's crazy fun and stupid hard, because unless you know the game really well, then you're just running in circles going, where do I find things?
Okay.
So that's some of my favorite retro games that I still play.
I would say mine are a little bit more limited just because I don't get an opportunity to video game much anymore. Probably my favorite that I always found myself gravitating back to as I was growing up was Prince of Persia, original SNES.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my, I'm tired of studying for finals, let me zone out, let me play like an hour's worth of this, even though I've played through it a bunch, and just kind of zone out. That was my go-to.
So you said that you don't have time to game anymore, which is understandable. The joys of being an adult and kind of getting to that point of not having the console sometimes to do it. What kind of retro-style game do you prefer that, or would you enjoy playing if you had the opportunity? I know I tried getting you into Hollow Knight a little bit.
And Hollow Knight scratched an itch for me, for sure. I am a side-scroller.
Yeah, it's funny, because he fights with a nail, so you scratch the itch. Anyway.
Anyway, I love side-scrollers. I love old-school, like, throwback Mario, Super NES side-scrollers.
So platformer styles?
Platformers,
Okay, because
yeah.
I was saying, like, I remember Streets of Rage 2 for Sega Genesis. That was side-scroller, but it was a fighty side-scroller, and it's still just...
I kind of actually like those too. I used to play, that's some of my more fonder memories with my brother, was
Turtles
we
in
used
Time
to play a fighting game, like it was a big burly dude and like a not burly guy, and we would fight, and we'd fight down the street. I don't remember what it's called. I will have to look it up.
I would say it sounds like Streets of Rage, but all right. For Super Nintendo.
And even actual fighting games like Mortal Kombat. I played a lot of Mortal Kombat growing up with my brother. It was the only time I was the bratty little sister that wanted to spend time with her brother, and I knew I could get time. I knew he would spend time with me if I offered to play video games. So I would offer to play Mortal Kombat or Killer Instinct or...
Ooh, Killer Instinct was a good one.
Tekken. I played a lot of Tekken and bowling alleys.
Yeah, you definitely mentioned before that you played a lot of... Like, Tekken was one of your major jams.
Tekken 3 was... I actually played Tekken 3 and not just button mashed. So I enjoyed... I put a lot of quarters in Tekken 3 in a bowling alley.
I definitely won a lot of Magic the Gathering cards playing X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
Right.
Before it became Capcom and all this other stuff. Also, an old buddy I used to hang with, he had a PlayStation before I did, and a PlayStation 2 before me, and Bloody Roar 1, 2, and 3 played the hell, and that's my furry side showing, I admit, played Bloody Roar like nuts, and basically mastered Long, who was a character that was all like semicircle up to back to up and down, like very, but it was very cool the way they made them, because the way the characters were too fit the way that you controlled them. And I mean that as Long was like a not even a judo. He was a karate guy, but like very, very fluid type of fighting. Okay. So a lot of his movement was semicircle back, and then round to up, and then hit the button. Where there's another character that was like a lizard man who was very floppy and like wore sandals and Hawaiian shirt and whatnot. And his controls were very jerky in terms of like right, left, down. So
I wonder if there was some type of game mechanic to that.
it was supposed to emphasize the character. If it was a very fluid type character, it had that flow. If it was a rougher, jerky type character, then you had sharper movements. So it added to that. You know, if you got a combo and stuff, it was just really neat conceptually. And then obviously you're able to transform into those animals.
Yeah.
Like the floppy guy was turned into a lizard, Long turned into a tiger. So it was a really, really cool game that I remember playing the crap out of when, you know, consoles more or less destroyed the arcade industry.
Well, and I actually played a lot of computer games by myself. Again, bratty younger sister, brother wasn't always around, but my dad was tech savvy. We had one of the first computers probably in our neighborhood, an old Hewlett Packard.
Oh, nice.
AOL was always around when growing up.
Yeah, but you got CDs sent every day.
Yeah, exactly.
500 hours.
Prodigy.
Oh, Jesus. And not the Firestarter?
Not the Firestarter.
Twisted Firestarter. Hey.
So I played a lot of I played a lot of DOS games. Played Carmen Sandiego. I played
Mech Warrior 2.
Number Munchers.
Okay.
I still know that I work in an industry where being a very good typist is a benefit, is
Mavis
a
Beacon.
boon. Mavis Beacon. I learned how to type on Mavis Beacon.
Mavis Beacon teaches typing.
Let's see, Number Munchers, Mavis Beacon, Carmen Sandiego, Full Throttle. I got into Myst when I was younger, but I did not enjoy. I think Myst was above my level of intelligence at the time.
Fair. Myst was just hard in general.
But I enjoyed the crap out of King's Quest.
King's Quest was a good one.
And I actually picked up all 4 or 5 episodes, I think. They deemed them episodes of Sierra just re-released King's Quest, like I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I picked up those. And it's fun. I feel like that grew me into, little knowing at the time, but that grew me into being a LARPer later on in life, because it was, pick up this, adventuring and talking to NPCs and picking up this item and going, oh, that's kind of cool. I guess I'll keep this. And then later on finding, oh, you need yellow stone to open this door.
That's fair. Yeah, and you did touch on Full Throttle. Like, there is a good block of games there that kind of got, I don't know, like hidden gems between Sam and Max, the original Sam and Max.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones kind of got weird, but the original Sam and Max and Full Throttle and those click adventure, Monkey Island, all those like click adventure games that were very intuitive at the time too. You know, you're running on limited resources.
Yeah.
So.
And I've played Grim Fandango many times.
That's a great game too. Jeez.
I picked that. I was gonna say I picked up that on PlayStation.
Were you old enough to deal with the text-based games? And obviously, we got some of our older listeners are probably remembering stuff like Zork Nemesis, or for me, it was Gemstone Dragon Realms.
I think I'm too young for that.
For me, it was Gemstone Dragon Realms, and it was a text-based MMO. I know a couple listeners, actually, and a couple friends as well, that played Gemstone Dragon Realms. There's a couple other games. There's just Gemstone, which is its own game, but then Dragon Realms, it was all text-based. You got to pick a class, you got to pick a race, you got to level up stats. When in combat, you had to actually, had to type /crab or stab crab, or you had to, but you had to read the text as you did your combat, because depending on how the creature attacked you, in the description of how it attacked you, left itself vulnerable for certain counterattacks, and you had to type those counterattacks, be it slash, stab, parry, whatever. And so it was just a wild game. That archery system, PvP was allowed. It was a really neat game just for text. I spent a lot of time on it. I don't even think that servers are around anymore. They might be. It's all text-based.
Right.
And I had maps of the whole world laid out in graph paper, because that's the only way to do it. Everything was all graphed out, and to find the Thieves Guild, you had to find the city and then find the sewer grate, but you actually had to like type /look or look sewer, and it'd be like, oh, you see a faint outline, and you'd be like, look outline. It's like the outline looks like a door. And you'd be like, open door. It's like, how do you do that? It's like you'd have to go all the way down to go this chain of command to be able to open a door into the sewers to find the secret area to become a thief for the Thieves Guild stuff.
Do you feel like you got some better sense of accomplishment when you played games like that, where it wasn't just spelled out for you? I know that when I played games like Full Throttle or Grim Fandango or Queen's Quest, I always felt like this, like, oh, I was smart enough to figure it out without having to look or cheat or anything like that.
Well, you're bringing up a point that kind of is the genesis of the entirety of this podcast, really, is at the time, I didn't feel terribly more intelligent because of that.
Okay.
Because that was required of the game. Like, this is a game, this is what it wants you to do, you did the thing, congratulations, you move on. Looking back at that game, going, I wonder how many kids now, how many WoW players, or how many style of games that kind of spoon feed you this stuff, how many of those people would be able to play those old style games where you weren't spoon fed? And I'm not going to sit here and be like some old guy going, kids these days have it so easy. because there's something to be said about the flow of a game that is quick and easier, so you pick it up and you're focusing more on other things the game has to offer rather than a game being limited by resources.
Right.
And so it's going to make you stuck on a door for an hour or two because beyond the door there's not much there.
Fair.
Whereas with, World of Warcraft or, even Rift or all these other MMOs or other games that are much more active, much more going on, if you gave me a game like that 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would have difficulty keeping up just because there's so much on the screen at once, where now it's like, okay, you managed
overload.
It's overload. Whereas you give somebody one of those old games where they have to sit and really focus on each and every word that is said, and even sometimes sit with a thesaurus.
Right.
And try to figure out what these words are that you can look at, or what are you doing to these objects, and try to figure out what this object is. Because you read it like, oh, okay, I assume it's a sewer grate, but it's not. Like, it's a portcullis. Okay, well, whatever. What's a portcullis? Well, you look it up and you realize that a portcullis could only be lifted or could only be opened in a lifting manner. So when you go to push the portcullis, nothing happens. You go to turn the portcullis, nothing happens. But if you lift the portcullis, then it opens.
Okay.
But people won't think about that. They'd be like, open portcullis. It's like, the portcullis is not open. So you just walk away, right? I'm done.
Ah, okay.
But you'd have to go lift portcullis, like the portcullis lifts. Little things like that is what those games emphasized on back in the day. Where now you just go open door. It's like, well, I mean, it's actually a fully sized drawbridge, but sure, it opens. Like,
right.
So it's little things like that that kind of do that. And so, yeah, it is definitely a topic we can get into as well, because it does go back into the generation of gamers that exist that make it interesting to see where, even in LARPing, tabletopping, role-playing gamers, PC gamers that have old-style gamers and then new-style gamers, where you do have people that focus on different things, that put an emphasis on different advantages and or perks and or styles of game, or sometimes mix the two, that like maybe something that requires, like Dark Souls, where you have to pay attention to what is going on. Because a lot of the speedrunners and a lot of players of games like Dark Souls and stuff have played it enough times where it's just memorizing the stuff.
Okay.
But your first time playing it, the game is hard, but it's fair. So you have to pay attention to what is going on. If you see, things are quiet all of a sudden, or you see like some bloodstains on the ground, you know something has happened here, therefore you should be on your guard.
Right.
And it's fair when you die. It's like, hey, this is what these guys do. You die.
It's teaching you to be that person.
To counter or to learn or to grow with the game.
Perspective.
Perceptive.
Thank you.
And so it's just that kind of stuff that I like, is those games that give you those opportunities to like, hey, you're going to try this tactic. This tactic will not work through the entire game. You can't just bounce on their head and stab them, because as soon as you fight a guy that's got an armored helmet, or worse, a helmet with a spike on it, that you're going to have to adapt to the situation and adapt to a new style of fighting or a whole new set of abilities.
Right.
So, anyway, next question.
Okay. So, this kind of goes into what we were talking about with our tabletopping or our favorite characters. But Iggy asks, I have a question. Importing the two Dusties, so Dusty Red and Dusty White, into the Alliance game gave you a chance to reinvent yourselves a bit. Is there anything you miss from the old days, meaning
Continue.
international? Are there any changes you are glad you made? Are there any changes you wish you had made?
So to paraphrase, we still do to a degree. I mean, we're still members of Nero International, and we've played our characters, Dusty Red and Dusty White, technically Dusty Moongazer and Dusty White, for 20-ish years, coming close to 20 years. And then only recently started playing the Alliance system in the last 5 years or so. But we made these Dusty Red, Dusty White into the Alliance as much lower level characters. So, is there anything that we... What's the question again exactly? Well, no, I want to make sure our listeners know.
That's
because,
fine.
So we took these characters that we played for a long time, took them to a new game, because it could go on a tabletop level too. It isn't just limited to LARPing. You could have a character concept. You've played, Steve and his Bag of Spiders, who is a level 40 D&D epic mage, and then decide to go play Pathfinder, and now you have Steve, who is a level 1 mage. Similar concept, similar personality.
Any of our listeners named Steve must feel completely picked on by you.
Yeah, sorry, Steve. I'm picking on Steve and his Bag of Spiders. Well, more importantly, if any of our listeners named Steve has a bag of spiders, then yes, he is deservedly getting picked on. But anyway.
So the question originally was, is there anything you miss from the old days?
So we'll start there.
Okay.
Is there anything that you miss from the old days, Dusty White?
I don't want to say old. Again, I still plan. We both still are members of International. We just haven't played in a while. But I think there's times where I do miss being able to have the set of skills needed to accomplish that extra oomph.
So you wish you're a higher level?
If you're gonna brass tacks it, yes.
Okay.
There are times where I got used to having a plot team would have to put me through the ringer to not have spells left at the end of an event. Now, the game and its escalation and the PowerPoint that it plays to got to that point of I was high enough level, then the plot can't. It's a vicious cycle.
Well, and that's where I wanted to call you out on that too. Is if the plot team has to be run through a ringer to give you a challenge, then the system is inherently broken.
I will agree with you to a point on that. I think there are some changes that could happen to make it so that it doesn't do that. And I think there's plenty of plot teams out there that do try to make that a little bit more.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about what
me
you
and
miss.
my changes.
What do you miss?
I will. That'll be what I will put. I will say there are times where I want to feel like I can accomplish anything that I put my mind to when it comes to pure power. There's obviously resource management in LARP and things like that.
And even, again, tabletop
that
too.
is kind of how you win, is if you resource manage correctly, then, and I use air quotes when I say win.
Sure.
But that is how you would be able to keep going, is if you have the resources to do so, and it's not just purely based on your own personal stats. What about you?
I am a little spoiled because, there is a point where I will say, I can see your point. Obviously, I'm going to poke at you on it when you say level, because there are aspects of being a higher level that's nice. At the same time, I have been crazily enjoying being a low level again, especially with the new, it's convenient that I'm lower level in a new rule system, so I don't feel bombarded. with a whole list of new abilities and such.
Right.
One of the things that I miss about the air quote old days is maybe this is only a weird thing. So for the character or for me, I guess for the character playing Dusty, one of the things I do miss is I do miss when there was a bit of a heyday with LARPing in the early 2000s where you had 100 to 200 people, like person events, where we played at least.
Which I never experienced.
Right.
So that's something you have.
Incorrect. You plotted an event that had 107 people.
That's different than getting
Fair.
to play it.
Fair, I agree. But it did exist.
That was a whole hell ton of work.
I agree. Thank goodness there weren't high level. So but it is a case of I'm stuttering over. I got a truck like right beside me that's like just staring me down. Like, come on, don't merge. Roadcast, woo! I do miss large scale events because that's when you find out that you're almost putting on a show for everybody else, much like they're putting on a show for you. There are some bad things to smaller events that allow for when you have, even like for tabletopping, or if it's a smaller group for tabletopping, there becomes a lot more out of gaminess that happens because it's just you and 1 or 2, 3 other, or just 10 others or something. Whereas when you're in a larger group or in a larger scenario, there's almost a vibe to either one-up each other and or interact at a level that goes far less out of gaming. So I guess that's my big thing would be I do miss huge events. I do miss a level of interaction that I guess I miss some of the newness too. Because as nice as it is being an older player,
Okay.
some of the new surprising and stuff like that isn't there too. Like, do you remember the first like year 3 that you started LARPing and like you were basically given plasma to go to the next event and like doing everything you can to scrape by to go?
I remember a couple of drives to a site that I probably shouldn't have done as late and as tired as I was. Absolutely. There's that excitement that you can't replicate when you're brand new to something that you're
100%.
like, oh my gosh, this is the best new thing.
And then you have the dual counter of we're a little bit older now and we're a little, I don't want to use the term jaded, but more experienced with this stuff. So we will take the precautions, or not even the precautions of like, I don't want to go LARPing in a tent. Like, I'm not terribly excited.
We have LARPed in tents.
We have, but it's not my favorite thing to do.
Right.
Once upon a time, I've definitely LARPed with just a tent and whatever clothes fit in a duffel bag and just rolled out for 4 or 5 days and did it. Because I was younger, I didn't care, I was excited about the game. Now I'm a little bit older. I want a cabin, I want a bed.
We're used to more comforts.
And not only the luxuries that the campsites afford, but even to a point of, I don't want to go to a campsite that doesn't have these luxuries because I'm a little bit older, I'm a little bit lazy, and because my excitement is there, like not as there as it was when I was younger. I will skip an event. I won't feel that, I need to be in an event if I don't have these luxuries in some regard. Like, yeah, I will still tent it up, and I do enjoy tenting it up, but there will definitely be a level of like, is there any other way for me to like get a cabin, or is there anything else I could do to like
Hotel off-site?
I mean, I've seen that. I've definitely seen.
I didn't do a hotel. I definitely did stayed at a friend's house and drove back and forth because she lived maybe 20 minutes away from site.
So to convert it to some of our tabletop players and such as well, I mean, same thing, and we could even tie back to some of those retro games and conversations we have before of, it's awesome to experience something, but at the same time it kind of sucks because you will never get that first experience again on that thing.
Right.
I will never get the first time I LARPed as my Red Fox ever again. Or the first time I've ever LARPed, period, ever again. And there is a sense of...
I don't want my first experience back. It was awful.
I mean...
And I was one of the rare few that even after a bad experience, I still gave it a second shot a year later.
Okay. But then a year later, that next one was good, right?
It was good, and it was more. I was more prepared on my end for it.
Okay, so that's something. But then that experience of your first good event and your experience, everything else, you won't have that experience again. You won't get grabbed like that ever again. Same thing when you play a major video game and you get the big reveal. Now that you know that knowledge, you could never unknow it.
Right.
So anytime you play that video game, even if it's your favorite, you will never get that experience again.
So the second part being, are there any changes you are glad you made, and are there any changes that you wish you made? This seems more of a in-game, like, character question than an out-of-game question.
It could go both. I mean, you first. How do you want to look at it?
I look at it as more of an in-game question. I actually just experienced... I was actually playing Dusty White at the Chicago Alliance game, and the owner, Rob, went on the assumption that because he had played with me as Dusty White at International, he knew I was a very straight-laced, no necromancy, no chaos type of character. Now, he didn't know that of Dusty White on the Alliance side, but he went on a hunch, and afterwards he did come and ask me. He's just like, I'm assuming you're kind of the same character. And I said, yeah, there's one thread of Dusty White that will always stay true.
Sure.
For switching over to Alliance, because of the way we did it, and it was basically a split off of our spirit, or a split.
Basically, yeah, a portal and pieces split. So
right.
there's a shard of your character here and a shard of your character elsewhere. So yeah, continue.
There's such a, for me, there's not much change that would have allowed me to suddenly be like, oh, I mean, I guess I could have, but I didn't come over being like, oh, I'm a necromancer, I'm evil bad guy. I think the changes I did make to my character as what her paths are, what she wants to pursue, because of some of the role play or some of the character growth that she has had over the years. I'm not seeking so much as to be a nature beacon or somebody of nature. I still will support nature, but I'm looking for more of my own path based on in Alliance. So what about you?
Things that I wish I changed? Or?
Things that you are glad you changed and things that you wish you had changed.
Things that I'm glad I've changed. I
know you've talked about the voice, the way you even voice.
Yeah, I mean, I did high squeaky voice for a while as my Fox at Nero International. I still do. Mainly, and I use that trick only because the transformation my character had, the ability to basically Super Saiyan out for the most part. Like, he's a foxkin, but then on full moons he turned into a werefox, which is weird. It's like a human turning into a werehuman, I guess. Like, just big, more muscly, and I mean, that was more or less his description, is he got more muscular and just kind of berserked out and raged out. So I use squeaky voice when I'm doing whatever else, and then when he went through this transformation, or he turned into like a higher, when he basically Super Saiyaned out, I spoke in a normal voice, so when people kind of was able to recognize even further that, oh, there's some sort of change that happened.
Okay.
I'm also glad I stopped squeaky voicing, because it just destroyed my voice after a weekend.
Right.
It just ate at my throat, and it got hard to do, and actually got to a point where it was getting too painful. So I'm glad I made those changes. I altered some personality stuff with Red that I started to do at Nero International, but just never was able to make the changeover. Whereas with Alliance, I've kind of danced more the Bard line now and kind of gone more in terms of going more musical and playing music at events and kind of just rolling with that mentality of, you know, I'm not as responsible as I used to be with Nero International. I kind of had a group under my belt and kind of had other people that kind of
looked up to you.
I was responsible for in some way. Whereas now I'm part of a group that's more of a family. I'm part of a group that
They feel responsible for you.
they feel responsible for me because of my lower level, but also I don't feel that I am responsible for them in that regard. Like, I don't have to go and babysit these characters. I don't feel like I have to, like, make sure they have a good time or make sure that things are all right. There's a lot less eggshell dancing on that I have to deal with. So it's a good change there. Some things I wish that I changed that I didn't. I mean, money equals costume.
Right.
I do wish I had the opportunity to swap out costume or change out things. I came in just wearing gray. Thankfully, with the group I joined, I am changing my colors out now. I am, wearing black and green and, emblazoning a lot of my costume with the emerald flame and doing all that stuff. And it's very fanboyish that I get picked on, because you pick on me too, of like, you're putting another flame
I
too.
really do.
But I do come from maybe the old school concepts of, God, it looks cool when you have a full group decked out with the symbols and the colors and and that very, like, when you see that group roll in, you know who they are, you know who they belong to, and it doesn't have to be Emerald Flame. It could be any group that chooses colors. A group that chooses, say, random color off the top of my head, black and red, rolls in using
Jackass.
using these colors, and using, even if you come in with, because we always use like black and X color, but use blue and green or these other colors that are very standoutish, and you recognize who they are, and it adds to a community, and adds to some degree to other players a goal that they may not have had, that knew that they had. You have some characters that come in and they play and they're not sure where they fit in the game, and then all of a sudden they see a group and they're like, I want to be part of that group. So that becomes a character concept or a character idea. And there's nothing wrong to go. I mean, there's a lot of games that are based on that, of, oh, you want to join the Thieves Guild, or you want to join the Barbarian Guild, or the Warrior Guild, or you want to join this team, the Brotherhood of whatever. There's nothing wrong with having that goal of, hey, I want to join the Brotherhood, or the Company, or the Emerald Flame, or Redemption, or, House Silverstar, or Lifestorm, or we keep going. Let's go. Order of the Lions. Like, although if you're a colored animal, chances are you're gonna die. That's the old adage. If you belong to a group that's like colored animal, you are doomed for a short life term. But it's a good goal to set if you're not sure on what to do or what to play, or what you come in and like, I don't feel I fit in. Look for that. Look for a group that you could gravitate to, or a group of people, because that also is where you meet some of your lifelong friends.
Fair. Okay. So anything that you would continue to change other than costuming?
I've definitely changed my character's path. I was known as the were creature. I was known as, playing with lycanthropy and dealing with the bigger story arcs that kind of came from it. It was cool seeing different chapters that I play at, or different games that I played at, that had their own version of were creatures. Mm-hmm. Some games I played had were creatures were face-eating monsters that on a full moon they transformed, ate faces, woke up the next day and didn't remember it.
Right.
Some games I played where there was a whole hierarchy of, you were a lesser, you were a greater, you were in control, or you were a noble type, or, just kind of, it was an affliction that you had and you dealt with it. And even further, some games had it to where they were separated into specific packs and they guarded their territory, almost like, I don't want to be politically incorrect, but almost like Native American tribes, where they would be in certain areas and they defended those areas, and that was where they lived, and it kind of set pacts and agreements with other races or other packs or other were creatures to say, these are my territory and this is my territory and this is this, and they kind of lived on that tribal type society, with the outside world kind of being shunned away. And it worked in a medieval fantasy setting, because You could have giant swaths of forest that were inhabited by werewolves and werefoxes. You could have the mountains that were inhabited by were-monkeys or were-goats or were-rams, and in the swamps that were were-snakes and very fitting to the species would live in these areas. So I do regret kind of some ways I regret
that so hard.
veering off of that path and kind of looking for a new path. And even though I don't quite have one yet, that's one of the good things of now I'm exploring a new path and exploring a new way to go and trying to use my experience of years of playing to help me find that path that I want to, that'll keep me coming back outside of playing with my friends.
Right. So we'll kind of take away from the LARP conversation and just kind of get more into general gaming or general communities. Nick, one of our newer listeners and Patreons,
supporters, yay,
went ahead and wrote, he says, have you noticed LARP communities can be both super welcoming and also first to complain or blow a situation beyond scope? Is it valid perception? If so, why? So I'm going to take him a little further step because, of course, with us being a part of another more broad community such as furry, what would you say to that question?
Okay. A, you're stealing my jokes, but secondly, number two, no, I think you're right and I think you're wrong in this sense.
Okay.
Any community that you belong to, you're going to notice the drama that's present because it's your community. I'm sure you've seen bullshit in the bowling community.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen bullshit in other gaming circles. I'm sure you've seen bullshit that happens and drama that happens at work even.
Right.
So as soon as you become
part of a group,
part of a community, you become subject to the drama that exists. So to answer that question in the very blunt and open way, yes and no. Yes, those stereotypes exist of these communities have drama, but no, it's not isolated to these communities. Now, I know you want to use furry because I did use it as a joke, and I used it as a joke because furry is a very interesting level of drama that happens because there's so many layers and depths that happen with it. One thing being that political standing might not fuck with LARPers.
Yeah, I've had that conversation a lot over the course of, because I have LARPed for so long. I've LARPed before there was really definitely LARPed longer than there was a Twitter or a Facebook. I don't need to know somebody's political standings to have a good weekend LARPing with them.
Absolutely.
Or role-playing with them. I definitely see as more of an outsider on the furry community than yourself.
Sure.
I definitely see there being more of there's a precedent to surround yourself with a certain aspect or political leaning or whatever have you, that you are either part of this group and you feel this way, or you're not, and then you could still be a furry, but you're not one of my furries or one of my friends.
And that's where the issue comes out is, yeah, a lot of LARPers will have that. And there's a general oversight of, obviously if you have those that are far in one direction or the other, extreme cases are bad always. And I will make that extreme assessment. Don't make blanket statements, and I'm going to make a blanket statement about making blanket statements.
Okay.
But, you don't want to have the extreme on either side, obviously. Unfortunately, with current political climate, furries do have a tendency of leaning left, and because of which, you do see a higher LGBTQ community within furry as well, which means those that lean right, and the heavier that they lean on the right side on the political right,
there's a blanket statement against them.
there is not only a blanket statement against it, but there's almost a blanket persecution against them, against trans people, against gay and straight, gay and lesbian, just, again, using the whole swath of LGBTQ people, fall under a level of persecution, fall under a level of personality types that have the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can do it, this is America, you're fine, well, while having a tendency of forgetting that a lot of these people in the furry community as well don't have bootstraps to pull themselves up with to begin with.
Right.
That come from dysfunctional families or come from situations that they are orphans, not because some 6-shooter kicked the door down and killed their parents, but got kicked out of their family because their sexual orientation, or because of something even maybe physically wrong with them or mentally wrong with them, due to having some sort of level of mental, I don't want to say disability, but having some sort of change in their mental chemistry that will make them different from the masses, or
right.
worse, what is considered by people who will lean in one direction or another normal. So you have a group of people that feel pushed away from society and use the furry community and use the furry culture as a great equalizer, because animals tend to be gender neutral in a lot of regards. You can't tell if an animal is male or female until you go, oh, that's a pretty girl, and God damn it, their owner's going to remind you right away it's a he. So,
right.
but you have that of, it's hard to tell if it's a male or female looking at them. You have it doesn't matter if it's a male or female. A lot of animals are friendly toward each other regardless of gender or identity or any such thing. So, and I'm getting very preachy here, and I apologize.
I'm letting you go.
But there is a case of, I used furry as a joke in that regard because, you don't know furry drama compared to LARP drama. But furry drama does have a different level of depth to it because of the vast number of underlying circumstances that happen to a vast majority of furries. I happen to be in a rare minority, or a unique minority at least, where I am a cisgendered male who is predominantly white. Like, I'm still Hispanic, but I am Hispanic up close. If I am down the block, a police officer will see that I am a white male.
Right.
It isn't until they see my ID where they go, oh, you're Hispanic? Well, here's the story. So I do have the benefits, for whatever it may be, of being a white male who is straight and born male and identify as male. So I have a little bit of a unique stance in the furry community, where you do have a larger level of LGBTQ and who identify as one way or the other, that in some ways I become the outlier. I become the black sheep in the community, and I do kind of on the outside looking in and just stand as an ally for them, but will never fully understand the challenges that face. So it's hard for me to be overly preachy because I've not been in that situation. I've not been, in that regard. So
I will kind of bring it back to the drama part of it. The question of it is, I feel like both communities, hands down, some of the most supportive communities that I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely.
I have seen LARP communities, when people are hitting that have hit hard patches in their life, be open-armed and supportive and be willing to go out of their way to help people.
The Venn diagram between furries and LARPers, I'm betting that both sides have a GoFundMe account somewhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Or have used GoFundMe or some sort of means to yep, I've definitely donated money to somebody in these communities because they've fallen on hard times.
Yep.
And you'll see that is definitely the overlap in a furry / LARPer Venn diagram of
there is, so to again, for Nick, they are some of the most supportive groups I've ever met. I've talked about it before. I would not be the person I am today if it was not for the LARP community and finding a group of friends that I gravitated to, and still finding people that I gravitate to, and find my life being enriched and enhanced by meeting these people and being part of this community. The other side of that is I feel like LARP drama tends to be less heated. It can be because LARP tends